ILC Daily Show. My name is Martin Murphy. We're coming to you live from our virtual studio here in Geneva. It's very blue, as you can see. It's the ILO colors. And I'm glad to be joined by our Senior Communications Officer in Beirut, Salwa Kana. Hi, Salwa. Good to see you.
Hi, Martin. It's good to see you. It's great to join you all for this first day of the International Labour Conference Plenary. It's also really good to see that there are so many joining from around the world. We're also broadcasting live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And also just a reminder that interpretation of the show is available in both French and Spanish. Martin?
That's right. Thank you very much, Salwa. So the ILC Daily Show is a mixture of live interviews with our experts. And also we're going to be bringing you some news from the field, some of the projects that we have on the ground. So we're going to have a very nice mix of features, news, and other information. Salwa.
Yes, that's true. And also, very importantly, we want to hear from you, everybody who's listening in right now. We'll be taking your questions during the show and putting them to our experts. And today's show looks particularly at the impact of COVID-19 on the world of work. You can post your related questions on Twitter with the hashtag ILC Daily Show. So that's hashtag ILC Daily Show, or in the comment section under the player if you're watching on Facebook. And a little later on, we'll be hearing from our Director of Research, Rick Sammons, about the latest World Employment and Social Outlook Trends report, which looks at the impact of COVID-19 on jobs.
Thanks, Salwa. But before we go to that, today actually was the beginning of the ILC Plenary. The plenary is where government, employer, and worker representatives come together to discuss different world of work issues. And today we had the visit, or actually the president of the Confederation of Switzerland, Guy Parmelin, addressed the plenary of the conference. He said that the ILC is particularly important, that this meeting comes at a time when our labor markets are reeling. He added that the COVID-19 crisis calls for more cooperation, first of all between governments, but also with the social partners to meet the challenges of the crisis and to address economic, social, and environmental concerns. He said that the ILO has been a pioneer in contributing to the establishment of framework conditions for fair economic and social relations through social dialogue at the international level. And he also noted that the ILO Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work that was adopted by the conference in 2019, that this declaration guides us on what needs to be done to ensure that the recovery of our economies has a strong social and people-centered component. We also heard from the Director General of the ILO, Guy Ryder, and he said that the world of work impact of COVID-19 has been cataclysmic, with the equivalent of 255 million full-time jobs lost in 2020. He added that it had exposed the brutalities of global inequalities. He also said that the pandemic has highlighted just how inextricably health, social, economic, financial, trade, and intellectual property policy really is. And he added that that has always been the case, but we are just paying more attention to it now because of the dire circumstances of the moment. He called for greater international cooperation and solidarity, particularly on global COVID vaccine rollout. And he said that the task ahead is constructing a human-centered recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. He said that the ILO Declaration for the Future of Work provides an agreed and highly valued roadmap to guide these efforts. We also heard in the plenary messages from the president of the conference, Omar Zniber, as well as the employer and worker vice presidents of the conference. And over the next few days, we're going to be bringing you more news from these plenary discussions. Salwa?
Thanks, Martin. The ILC, of course, this time round is taking place at a pivotal moment. COVID-19 has had a devastating human impact over the last 18 months and has turned the world of work upside down. As vaccines begin to roll out, there are hopes of recovery in some countries. For others, however, COVID-19 continues to take a terrible toll. Over the course of the next 2 weeks and during its second segment in November as well, the ILC will address issues related to the pandemic, including the world of work response and how to build a better future of work from the crisis.
That's right, Salwa. And before the ILC, we had the chance to catch up with ILO Director General Guy Ryder, and this is what he had to say.
Well, despite the fact that we're operating in a virtual modality, this is a conference like any other conference session with a very full agenda of key items of importance to the world of work. So we have issues of social protection, we have skills and lifelong learning, we have issues of inequality, and we need to adopt very clear positions on all of these issues to plan a way forward for the world of work, building on what we did at the Centenary conference 2 years ago. We have regular business on the application of international labour standards around the world. We'll be listening to delegates, governments, workers and employers and their views on all of these issues, and also very particularly on how we are going to plan building forward from this crisis in what we call a human-centred global response for recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. So it's a really very full agenda. And I can think of two things which make this conference particularly significant. The first is that, and I regret it, we're not able to greet delegates here in Geneva. We're operating on a virtual modality. It is vital for the integrity and the continuity of our organisation that we make a success of this conference, that it takes place, that we show that the ILO is very much in business, and the business of governments, workers and employers around the world continues to be advanced through the ILO. And the second thing which I think makes this conference perhaps more than usually important is the situation the world finds itself in. We are still in the worst world of work crisis that any of us can possibly remember. And we're building a way out of that crisis. And it's important, it's more than important, it's crucial that the ILO be a leader, a pathfinder for the future of work that we want building forward from this crisis.
That was ILO Director General Guy Ryder on why this is such an important ILC. And of course, the conference, the ILC, brings together governments and employer and worker organizations from the ILO's 187 member states. We also caught up with the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, Sharon Burrow, and here's what she had to say about this year's conference.
This ILO conference is so important to advance the social contract. With the pre-existing crisis of historic levels of inequality and the climate emergency where we must transition to a net zero future, already giving people anxiety, risking jobs, seeing despair, you overlay that with the impact of COVID-19, the loss of lives and livelihoods, people know that we need a new social contract. This ILC will deal with two critical areas. One is the COVID response, and that means that the Centenary Declaration, with a commitment to rights, universal social protection, transformative agenda for women, just transition for climate and technology, and repair of our public services up front and centre. And of course, the dedicated discussion to universal social protection. Critical if we're to have a resilient future where people have some hope. The solidarity to help poorer countries set up these systems, absolute. And later this year we'll look at inequality and skills. All of these issues are vital to a new social contract. But so too is the critical cases that will be dealt with in the Committee on Application of Standards. We need to know that in fact those countries where rights are under attack are indeed being supported and called to account in many cases to right their labour laws, to repair the broken labour market, to see that people have a just future where decent work, meeting the test of the SDGs, is possible.
And we also heard from the Secretary General of the the International Organization of Employers, Roberto Suarez Santos.
Thank you. My name is Roberto Suarez. I'm the Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers. For more than 100 years, the International Organization of Employers has been coordinating business in the International Labour Conference. But this is a special year in which we will have a fully virtual International Labour Conference, very challenging, but also a challenging year in which we are witnessing the devastating consequence of this pandemic. Inequalities, lack of incomes, business continuity, companies closing. What we are expecting? We're expecting that the three constituents of the ILO, employers, workers and governments, are up to the expectations and produce outcomes that are relevant for a job recovery, for a proper business environment, which will lead to decent jobs. That's what we are expecting. And we have to be responsible and we have to be partnering in an efficient manner. I wish to all the participants to be with us in this joint effort. Thank you very much.
That was Roberto Suarez Santos, the Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers. As I mentioned earlier, just ahead of the conference on June 2nd, the ILO published a new World Employment and Social Outlook Trends report for 2021. It assessed the labor market impact of COVID-19 and warned of increased geographic and demographic inequality, rising poverty, and fewer decent jobs. Here's a short video on its key findings.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented disruption to labor markets worldwide and worsened long-standing inequalities.
Think, for example, of a young person. The pandemic has severely disrupted his or her education, particularly in those regions of the world where digital infrastructure is less developed. It has also made it much more difficult to enter the labor market or keep a first job.
Think of the situation of women. Across the world, they often had to take care of their families, which meant that they had to reduce the time they spent in paid work. Many of them have dropped out of the labor force, putting at risk years of progress towards achieving gender equality and implying a shift back to more traditional gender roles.
Think of the informal and low-skilled workers whose life have been brutally changed by the pandemic. Working from home was not an option for many of them, and in order to keep the jobs they had to face huge health risks, often with no access to any kind of social security benefits.
It won't be easy to close the gaps opened up by the crisis. An estimated additional 108 million workers and their family members now live in poverty.
Future prospects are not optimistic. As labor markets slowly enter into recovery, the new jobs that have become available are often of low quality.
In the next 2 years, employment creation will not be strong enough to provide sufficient employment opportunities for those who lost their jobs, as well as for younger workers who enter the labor market for the first time.
The job shortfall induced by the pandemic amounts to 75 million jobs in 2021 and 23 million in 2022. Global unemployment is expected to stand at 205 million people in 2022, greatly surpassing the 2019 level of 187 million.
The recovery will remain fragile in many countries due to the uneven rollout of vaccination campaigns and high levels of public debt and deficits that make it difficult to tackle the effects of the pandemic.
The pandemic also means that global disparities will widen. To avoid long-term consequences that could scar future generations of workers, we need to build back better.
We need to create productive employment opportunities and foster longer-term labor market prospects of the most vulnerable. We also need to strengthen social protection and make sure nobody is left behind. All this will require strong institutions and social dialogue and strong international cooperation to fight global disparities.
It will have to be a joint effort, a common cause, because we will only be successful if we do it together.
To find out more, look into this year's World Employment and Social Outlook Trends Report.
Great, some very sobering data there, but also some cause for optimism that the recovery is likely. And now to learn a bit more about the report, what it had to say, we're joined live by Rick Sammons. He's the director of the ILO Research Department. Hi, Rick. Good to have you with us. And before I ask you the first question, I just wanted to ask our audience if they have any questions for Rick. If you can please use the hashtag ILC Daily Show, or if you're watching through Facebook, if you can please post your questions on the comment box. Rick, we just saw a short video with the main findings of the report, but in your opinion, what were the main takeaways of this report?
Hello there, Martin. Nice to be with you and everyone else today. I'd say the two top line issues that come out of this really quite unprecedented analysis of what happened in the world of work as a result of the pandemic are, first, that while we're seeing a recovery, based on the current trajectory, it's not going to be sufficient to get us back on track. What I mean by on track is where we were headed pre-pandemic in terms of the number of jobs and the quality of jobs. So clearly there's going to be a need for additional deliberate, concerted effort to have a recovery from this pandemic. There'll be a shortfall even this year of 75 million jobs versus the scenario in which we never had a pandemic. And even in 2022, next year, based on current trends, we'll still be 23 million jobs short or so. So that's the first really quite significant takeaway from the analysis we have been able to do. The second is indeed, as was referred to a little while ago, the very uneven, heterogeneous nature of the impact of this pandemic in the world of work. Young people have been disproportionately affected. They've experienced 2.5 times the drop in employment rates that older or adult, if you will, older workers have experienced. Women have also been disproportionately affected. And 90% of women who lost their jobs, not only just lost their job, but they exited the workforce. They became inactive for a variety of reasons, including their duties at home. And there are several other groups that have been disproportionately affected as well. So the takeaway there from the report is that we can't be too complacent or too satisfied when we begin to see average improvement, which typically the form it takes is in we see some positive movement in GDP statistics, economic growth statistics. We have to realize there has been some very uneven impact from this pandemic. And if we want a truly strong recovery, we have to think about it in these differential terms and have specific effort and policy to bring everybody along.
Thank you, Rick. As you've just said, the global employment recovery is projected to accelerate in the second half of 21, but it's expected to be uneven. Can you tell us a bit more about why and what it looks like for different regions?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. It's the unevenness is not only within countries in these different, more vulnerable and more affected groups, sectors of the economy and different types of workers, but the unevenness is also across the world economy, between and among different regions. So for example, Latin America was most strongly affected by the crisis and saw about a 33% drop in working hours during 2020. Now it has been also recovering faster because it's climbing out of a deeper hole than other regions, but it is still well below that pre-pandemic trend line. At the other end of the spectrum is the Asia Pacific region, where a number of larger economies have been able to weather the pandemic in a bit better shape than other regions. And there, for the first quarter in the Asia Pacific region, we saw working hours down, quote unquote, only 3% relative to 17% in the second quarter of 2020. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, if you will, of experience thus far in the recovery, and the other regions fall somewhere in between.
Now, Rick, according to the report, the recovery strategy needs to be built or structured around 4 principles. Could you tell us what those principles are?
Yes, and maybe before I talk about the principles per se, one thing we have to bear in mind, of course, is that 2 things have a strong influence. One is vaccines and treatment and protection and access there too. That is unevenly distributed within societies and across countries. And that's a very important question mark hanging over even the projections I just articulated a moment ago. But for all countries, irrespective of whether they have been less affected or more profoundly affected, we suggest that there are 4 domains that would be very useful to work on through a stronger effort, stronger cooperation. The first is to promote broad-based economic growth and employment creation through a number of things, but notably through supportive macroeconomic policy, fiscal and monetary policy, but also strengthen incentives for investment in key sectors that have either been hardest hit by the crisis and need additional support, or in some areas of the economy which have very strong potential to create decent work, such as the care economy or sustainable infrastructure or the education sector. These are parts of our economies that are not only labor intensive and therefore can be a powerful engine of recovery, but they also have positive social benefits. They improve our living standards.
Okay.
Secondly, there's going to be a need to support workers making transitions.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have some questions coming in from Sorry, I might have cut in there. There's a bit of a delay, so I do apologize, but we do have some questions coming in on social. We have a question from Sandra from Argentina. She asks, did the pandemic put at risk the eradication of working poverty? If we could have a brief response to that, please, Rick.
The pandemic really had a major effect on progress on working poverty. There was about an 8.3% drop in labor income. Most people rely on their wages, their labor income, for their livelihood. And therefore, workers in poverty, either extreme poverty or moderate poverty, that's to say people living with less than $3.20 a day, increased by more than 100 million. Since before the pandemic times. That's a very large increase in poverty. And it is so significant that it effectively reverses 5 years of gains in the reduction of poverty.
And I think we have time for one quick question also coming from social media. This is from John in Ireland, I believe. Yep. And he's asking about women. He says that we know, and we heard this in the report, that women have been hit in a disproportionate way by the crisis. Are there any specific policies that can be put in place to address this issue?
Yes, there are a number in this regard. Clearly, discrimination based on gender and other domains becomes even more important to combat in this environment in which women have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Secondly, there are areas where women have a disproportionate representation in the workforce, and therefore these are areas such as the care economy, which are ripe for further support through both public and private investment. And then thirdly, I would just quickly add that still the disproportionate share of responsibility for taking care of kids or dependents, even older family members, tends to fall on women, and therefore policies and incentives that help to alleviate that burden, either through public services or through incentives for private businesses to create a supportive work environment in this regard, would also be another area that would help in this regard.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick, for taking the time to be with us. And a reminder that if you want to access the report, you can do so at ilo.org. That's our external website. Now, before we go, we want to show you a little bit of the work that the ILO does on the ground in the field, in our different projects. This is where the decent work agenda comes into life. And the first one that we have comes from the Philippines, from Mindanao, and it's from Jeneline Aguinaldo. She's the person who's in charge of the project. This is a project that's funded by the government of Japan. And the project is about working to deliver clean water during the pandemic.
This is Jen Aguinaldo, manager of the ILO Japan Water Project in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Philippines. COVID-19 has exacerbated existing fragilities in conflict-sensitive areas such as the Bangsamoro region. This region is considered as the poorest in the country and is transitioning into a new form of government. During these critical and challenging times, the ILO is contributing to the peace and development in the region through the empowerment of the communities, provision of decent jobs, and improving access to safe water. Right now, I am in Barangay Luoy, South Upi, a fourth-class municipality in the province of Maguindanao. And right behind me is the newly constructed water system, which will soon benefit around 500 households in this area. This was constructed by around 250 workers. Majority of them are from the indigenous people tribe called Teduray, and 30% of them are women. People in this area relied heavily on unsafe sources such as this dog well. And with the new water system, they'd be able to enjoy safer and cleaner water. 11 water sub-projects such as this one are planned to be completed in the region. To date, 2 of these water systems have already been completed and enjoyed by around 3,500 households and 3,000 school children. 3 of the water sites will be completed this month, and the 6 others will be started this quarter. The ILO Japan Water Project has become more relevant now than ever because it provides the essentials during this pandemic: decent jobs, social protection, improved access to safe water, and safety and health in the workplace.
It's really great to hear directly from colleagues in the field who have been working very hard to keep projects running during these very difficult times. Thank you, Jenny Lynn, for your video. And as Martin mentioned, that project is delivered in partnership with the government of Japan. And we'll be bringing you another video tomorrow. Martin?
That's right, Salwa. Thank you very much. So we're getting to the end of the first program. Just a reminder that if you want to know more about what's going on during the International Labour Conference, you can follow our live blog, which is in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, and you can access it through www.ilo.org/ILC. And also, we'll be back tomorrow at 4:30 Central European Time. That's 2:30 GMT. But before, if you want to tune in to the plenary, that begins at 1 p.m. Central European Time. That's 11 a.m. GMT. And you can access all that through the website, through the ILC website. So that's about it from us. Tomorrow we'll be back, but you'll have different hosts. So I'll say goodbye for now. Salwa, thank you very much for presenting with me. It's been a great pleasure to be with you virtually. So thanks a lot for this.
Thank you, Martin. The same from here, and I wish all those watching the best from the ILO Regional Office in Beirut, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget, in the meantime, to post your questions using the hashtag ILC Daily Show. That's goodbye from me.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.